If you're watching this, you've been asked to give a eulogy for someone you don't know really well, and you're faced with the difficult task of standing in front of their family, friends, and saying something meaningful and impactful about that person. It's a tough gig, but if you give me 2 minutes, I'll give you everything you need to know to write a well-done eulogy that's respectful and authentic without knowing the finer details of that person inside and out. First, let's start with the practical basics. A eulogy should be about 5 to 7 minutes, and for most people this works out in the ballpark of 700 to 900 words. Account for being a little bit slower because emotion can take hold. And this leads to the second point where you absolutely have to have a script, no matter what. I prefer a printed script just because with a phone it's a lot easier to lose your spot, and in eulogy I presented, my dad's, I missed a whole paragraph just because I was stressed out and emotional. And even if you're not someone who knows them specifically well, if you're second or third speaker, emotions could be running very high in the room already, making it far more difficult. Absolutely have a script at all costs. And that word count, 700 to 900, is about what we're working with in the format I'm going to give you to write something spot on. For the structure, you want to keep it simple. You start with an introduction, and in the introduction you really have one goal, and that's to introduce yourself and describe the relationship you had to the deceased. You don't really need to overthink this, and this really sets the tone. Once people understand your relationship with the deceased, they'll have a bit more of an understanding of where you're coming from, and it's going to be more authentic because they're going to understand you don't know everything about that person based on that potentially limited interaction you might have had. So it's very important not to skimp out on the introduction. In this, you never want to say, I wish I knew them better, or the other one I see a lot is, I'm probably not the best person to do this, because this starts you off on the wrong foot entirely. If you need to reshape this, say, Dave was someone I wish I'd known better. Or say, even though our time together was brief, Dave left a huge impact on me because of X, Y, and Z. And that sort of then sets you up for the meat and potatoes of the speech, which will be a story. So part 2 is a story. What I tell people with this is demonstrate, don't describe. When I'm editing a eulogy, I'll often see Damien was kind, he was hardworking, he was genuine. People have a tendency to list the aspects of someone they admire or that part of their personality that left an impact, and it's far better to demonstrate this through storytelling. So what do I mean by this? You want to tell a story, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be your own. It can be a story of a family member's interaction with that person, or someone who knew them a lot better that you could talk to who potentially is just incapable of coming up and speaking, and you could tell a story from their perspective or even through them, and that can serve as a story. And it can be a great way of doing it when you don't really know that person at all. If you do have interactions with them, it's great to pull something from potentially a family event, a time you spent together, going to a football game, or a Christmas dinner, or a fishing trip together, or if you're co-workers, it could be a Christmas party, or the time you both got bonuses together for a sales job. It doesn't need to be a grandiose event. It could very well be just a day-to-day thing that left an impact on you and had sort of that showing of who that person is, the essence of what they were about. Part 3 is to find a theme, and the easiest way to do that is to pick a very specific trait that you think the deceased was known for and sort of tie in your message with that. If you think Dave was a hard-working individual, that could be the theme of what you're saying. It could have been that he left an impact on you, that you then saw the value of hard work in your chosen field and went on to do bigger and better things because of it. Now, you don't want to make it about you, but you really ideally want to have it as, here's a theme, a trait, something that rubbed off on you or left an impact on the people around you. This could be anything from sort of kindness, compassion, selfless act that they've done. Your theme does want to connect to the story, but they don't have to be the same thing. For the closing, the main thing you want to do is express gratitude. You want to talk about the impact they left on you and those around them, and really just be thankful for even having a relationship at all, and sort of talk through that. You want to be honest and authentic. You don't need to pretend you were better friends than you were, even if the moments you shared were only brief. If they were impactful, that's what you lean into with what you talk about. My name is Chris Grayson, and I'm a co-founder of goldengoodbyes.com. We create obituaries, funeral program guides, but more commonly, eulogies. I genuinely believe that you're capable of creating a great eulogy that's authentic and meaningful. But if you're really time-strapped and you're already emotional and the task just seems too overwhelming, we're here to help. Follow the link in the description and we'll produce something amazing for you. I'm now going to expand on each point and also give clear examples of a well-written element of that eulogy and a poorly written one, just so you can see them side by side and maybe help perfect and iron out your own eulogy. So the story makes up the bulk of what you're going to be saying. 5 to 7 minutes, while it might seem long, can go very quick with a well-written story. Your main objective of this is to demonstrate who they were as a person. So at all costs, you sort of avoid going into third person and saying he was kind, he was generous, he was fun-loving. You really want to scrap all of that and just give the audience a memory of yours, ideally, but it doesn't have to be yours necessarily, of first person. Here is an interaction with Dave, here is a memory we shared together, here is an event we were at, and through that, in first person, you can demonstrate who they were and sort of the essence of them as a person. So what do you choose for the story? Ideally, a personal memory. This is just easiest because you don't need to go through anyone else. You can just choose something, an experience you shared with the deceased, and talk about it. Here, you really want to avoid adjectives. Listing adjectives is a great way to have people sort of switch off and not engage with what you're talking about. Really what you want to do is give that first person example. And by this I mean, in the story you're recalling, have it from your perspective and talk about that conversation you had, the back and forth. Read it in sort of that language of, give them a chance to sort of see a conversation and what Jonathan would have been like, because these are people who know him well, and odds are they're going to be able to relate with how he responds. And you don't really have to lie or make anything up or fabricate. Here you're just giving an authentic story, and it can even be a small interaction. If you're a coworker, it could be something as simple as having a laugh when something exploded in the microwave, and that sort of leading on to, you know, a friendship and inside jokes you had. So you really don't need to have a grandiose example for your story. All you need is sort of something that really shows who they were as a person. You don't need to demonstrate a lot of elements of their personality. You can just keep it around 1 or 2. If you only sort of met them once or twice, or really had a minimal amount to do with them, another great way you can source a story is to take it from someone who knew them a lot better. When you're doing a eulogy, there are a lot of people in your audience that probably are incapable of standing up and speaking, generally those who are close to them. So in this, you can go to someone, talk about a cherished memory that they have, one that ideally demonstrates this general theme of what you want to go with, and talk from their perspective. And this is a great way to sort of bypass not knowing them particularly well, because it is very authentic and you're tapping into that emotion and you're tapping into someone who you can directly quote as well. And the audience is going to resonate with that authenticity. They're going to get a lot better sense of who they were between your various points. So between your interpretation of who Jonathan was and theirs, that leads on to the impact they had on me. Sometimes a story will only be quite small, and while I think it is important to be sort of concise in that storytelling element, sometimes two are heavily linked. For example, if you've got a key trait of someone being a funny guy, tell a few stories where he just cracked people up, because more often than not, people want to be remembered for those traits that others admired them for, and it's often what sort of personalities are built around. It really gives you that authentic feel for who they were, and you're not going to disengage the audience by just listing a bunch of adjectives that Google tells you should be in a eulogy. And it's important not to sort of look at other eulogies and try and perfectly emulate that. A story is unique, and it needs to be that. People will see through it if it's fabricated or it sounds a bit off. Always rely on something that actually happened, and it can be minor, it can be small. It only really needs to be an interaction that was personal and important to you. It might have been another day in Jonathan's life and meant nothing, but if it left an impact on you, that's a great story to tell. Here's an example of taking a borrowed story from someone else and weaving it into your own eulogy. I asked Tom's daughter what she'll miss most, and she told me, "My dad had this rule. No matter how busy he was, if we needed to talk, he'd put down his phone, look me in the eye and listen. No distractions, no half listening." And what you have there is something very impactful. It's a very small story, but it's something you could build around your own, where you talk about someone being a good listener, and then you give an example of your own experience with them being a good listener. The third part of a good eulogy is finding a theme to tie it all together. And this is where I say focus on one specific trait that they had that you admired, and have that be your message to the audience. If there's one thing we could take away from the impact that the person had, it's this. Let's live a little bit larger, let's stay up a little bit later, let's have a laugh, let's not take life too seriously. Like, these are sort of core traits that someone might have that you could really build into the message. If they were kind and compassionate, your message can be, show a little bit of kindness of a stranger. This is a great way to honor Dawn's legacy. Doing this will keep the eulogy focused and give you a good tie-off to the story. So you've got the introduction, you describe who you are, your relationship, the story where you demonstrate who they were to you and also who they were as a person, and then your takeaway, which is, if there's one trait that we should all sort of be more like him in, it's this. Here's something I learned from him that's going to change the way I live and impact my life forever. So that's a really great way to tie it off, because it sort of follows that natural process of story to message, and that sort of leaves you the closing. The closing doesn't have to be a dramatic conclusion, and a lot of times people will try and overdo it by saying something big and grandiose. Really, all you want to do is be genuine, thank the audience for being there, thank the deceased for the impact they've left on you, and that's really your core takeaway, is the deceased has improved your lives in X and Y, depending on what their core traits were. So I think it's very important early on to sort of look at the traits that they would most be known for, because that's going to resonate with your audience better. If they know Julie as this loving, kind, give you the shirt off her back type of person, then a story that demonstrates that, and a theme and a message that asks people to be a bit kinder, is going to be impactful, and it's a great way to tie off your speech. An example of this closing impact statement would be, "I may not have known Sarah as well as many of you, but even in the brief time I did, I saw kindness, humor, generosity that left an impression. And from everything I've heard, I know that impression will last far beyond today." And here you have something impacts the audience, and while you are sort of listing those adjectives a little bit, in your tie off, you really are just reiterating what that story and theme and message was. At the end of the day, you're there to pay homage and respect the legacy of the deceased, not to make it about you. If this helped at all, let me know in the comments, because I'd love to keep creating videos that help people through these difficult parts of death. If you know someone who is currently writing a eulogy and they're struggling, please send them this video. It will help a lot. If you've had experience with other eulogies and could give some feedback on the process, I'd really appreciate it. It'd be great to sort of put it out there and have it help others that are in this difficult process. At the end of the day, this channel was made out of passion from my own experience and losing loved ones in my own family. And I really want you to do a good job. Yes, we have a service, and if you're struggling, go to goldengoodbyes.com and we will help you right the way through the process. But I genuinely believe you can do a good job. Just follow the structure, find a good story, link it into that theme, and really talk about that impact that person had. That's the best way to pay someone homage. No one should have to navigate this process alone. We're here to help.